Well, on the topic of Labour's failures, they want to build giant migrant battery farms all across the country. They're not just content with having them in hotels in the major cities. No. They want to spread the benefits of diversity far and wide across the hitherto so far untouched corners of England. And for everyone who expected that Labour might be a bit more moderate, that they might, as Dr. Parvini says, put the woke away, no, it's very much on Oral McIntyre's rails. They cannot course correct. They will careen off a cliff at this point. An example of where they need to deal with this problem is that on Monday, more than 700 migrants arrived into Britain. 703 broke in to the country on 11 boats. This was on Sunday, so the data came on Monday. The total number of arrivals to the UK in 2024 is at 18,342, and that's obviously the low estimate, 13% higher than at the same point last year when only 16,000 had crossed. So line go up. You can just feel the GDP.
But I thought based Keir Starmer was going to prevent this.
No. It's almost like Carl's prediction was entirely bloody wrong. And we kept telling him.
Carl's prediction?
Carl kept saying that Keir will get immigration.
Wait,
now.
Carl,
what? Why?
Carl didn't get in with that as well, did
Carl
he?
kept saying it. I swear you were on the panel sometimes when he said it.
He is talking with Georgia Maloney, though, isn't he, about...
But even Georgia Maloney has been a total disappointment. I'm
yeah,
always
of course,
promised
of
far-right
course.
politicians, but they never deliver.
Well, the reason for Italy is because the mob is in control of human trafficking, so it will never be lowered. Like, my Italian friend spends a lot of time there and understands this, and he just said, look, even if Maloney wanted to make good on her promises, she couldn't because the Mafia will just withdraw all their money and then there'll be a financial collapse.
Well, you need some sort of Bukele figure to come in.
It would be fantastic in Britain. I'm sure Caesar is out there, but we haven't spotted him yet, I'm afraid. 2 people also died during the crossing. Something to do with the fuel leaking from the boat and something. It makes a difference for them having actual machete fights in inflatable dinghies, which has happened before. So there you go.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, and also the asylum costs have reached record highs. And this is Martin Daubney sharing this information. He claims that it's 6.6 billion a year, and he contrasts it to the winter fuel payments that were just cut for pensioners, which were only 2 billion per year, to which my boomer grandparents, who, despite everything that happened, including the whole Liz Truss and Jess Phillips kerfuffle involving me, still voted Labour, and even they're saying this isn't what we voted for. Well,
It literally is, though.
it was.
Yeah.
They were promising it. It was entirely predictable. But actually, I think Martin might be underestimating here, because I spoke to Dame Andrea Jenkins, and she costed it at 14.4 billion a year. And even Labour at the tail end of the Rishi Sunak days, when they were in their interests to publish damning statistics, said that it cost not £6 million a day, but actually £10 million a day to house all these people in hotels. So
the economic benefits of migration are actually quite costly, it turns out.
Yeah, but have you considered that state spending is factored into GDP, and therefore GDP will go up?
Oh, right. Line go up.
Exactly, yeah. Line must always go up. Line on GDP, line on stabbings, line on fraud, all goes up. Right, so solution. Angela Rayner, who's the Deputy Prime Minister now, and is also the Housing and Levelling Up Minister. So, again, more lines going up. She said that every part of Britain will take its fair share of migrants. Now, this was right before the general election, published in the Telegraph, and she said they would take their fair share of asylum seekers, and the reason she's saying that is because the Conservatives had a scheme where deprived towns, like Swindon, said to their local councils, if you take a fair share of asylum seekers, we will give you lots of money for new developments. Now, obviously, all that money got spaffed away on hotels, and the local economy did not flourish because...
And pensions for councillors, I bet.
Yeah, very, very true. They were mainly concentrated in Labour districts. The Tory districts didn't take that many. So now she's saying, well, now that Labour are in charge, we'll move them across the country to get an equitable share of all of this. So how are they going to do it is the question. Because sure, there's lots of hotels that are quite full now.
Is the framing of this, if this is something akin to what she said, take your fair share of migrants, not implicitly accepting that, yes, they are a burden?
Well, yes.
Because the fair share is like taking the fair share of
taxes.
Taxes, or if you're carrying luggage to and from a place, then you all just have to carry some.
Fair share of housework.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's like complaining that your sibling isn't picking up their share of the dog excrement in the garden, and you're having to do it all the time. So little Timmy has to go out and pick up his fair hand.
Either way, it doesn't matter. Eventually, we will come to a government who will just actively say, yes, you deserve this, and we're doing this to hurt you.
Well, they already do imply that, at least their acolytes do on Twitter, whenever they have the contradictory position of this is diverse, it's enriching, it's positive, we actually built Britain, and also immigration is revenge for colonialism, therefore it's a net detriment and you have to pay for it.
Yeah, if something can be used as revenge, it's not a good thing.
Yes, quite.
But I was going to say the Conservatives were talking about this, though, as well. They were talking about replenishing aging rural. They actually used the term, I think, I don't know if they used the term the Great Replenishment, but I wrote about it for National Pulse like a year ago. I think November 2023, maybe even earlier than that. And there was a Conservative scheme that was going to be trialled of sending migrants to rural communities to replenish them. And replenish was the term that was used, based on pilot schemes that have been carried out in Canada. So I think there's something called it's not the Atlantic Initiative, I think it's called, something like that, where they were sending migrants to rural provinces in order to boost the local economy, basically.
Right, to go work at Tim Hortons.
Yeah, they've done it in France as well. They've done it in Spain, and the Conservatives were talking about it. It was being tried. It was going to be trialed, but then.
Which is obviously a great idea, because if you look at these rural communities, these are places where probably low-skilled people have the hardest time finding work and employment. So obviously you want to send people over who are going to undercut those wages even further.
Yeah, exactly. If they hated the Tories already because Margaret Thatcher desolated the mining towns and didn't build up their infrastructure and their sense of long-held community identity around a particular vocation, then they're going to hate them even more when they put lots more people into their deprived communities without an expansion of infrastructure, GP appointments, schools, and also when those people have cultures that are actively prejudicial against the host population.
Right, and the way that they're doing it. So if I had my ideal immigration system, it'd be very, very limited, if at all.
Zero.
But yeah, I've actually talked about my husband for this. It is unfair historically how the urban centers always get the immigrants, right? Very few people move to America and they dream of going to Montana, right? It just doesn't happen. If I were the government, I would say, okay, if you have the investment or you're a doctor, you can come, but for 5 to 10 years, because you're an immigrant, you don't have right of free movement within the country. You have to live where we tell you specifically. You're going there specifically to provide jobs, or this community needs a doctor, they've accepted they want you. That's how it has to be. But because we have this influx of low-skilled migrants, it's almost like you're, instead of potentially maybe helping these communities if they wanted investment from, some venture capitalist who just wanted to be in America that badly, he would live in South Dakota, no offense. You're actually harming these people even worse. And what hurts me is that these are not people who are voting for these policies, right? These are not very liberal populations by and large. So it's like, really, these are people whose voices are not heard, their wills are not being listened to. And this is why you have things like riots happening, because these people feel totally disenfranchised, like they have no power.
In the Labour heartland northern towns that have made first contact with these people. A great statistic on that, the sort of freedom of movement within the economy, I think it was 2022, they had 70,000 health and social care worker visas issued in the UK, only 11,000 vacancies filled.
Right.
So they came on the social care visa and disappeared straight into the Deliveroo economy.
Yeah.
Again, feel the GDP.
Well, all I'm reminded of is that one meme where it's World War II was planes dropping bombs and World War III planes dropping Africans.
Well, speaking of which, that's actually the solution of how they're going to solve it, because now we have Operation Dispersal. That's what it's being called. This has been published in the Times with, actually, ironically, yes, an image of our
warfare,
our potential Britons,
new warfare.
Our Britons in waiting, invading. Again, reminder: there have been more Channel crossers than there were lads that stormed the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. Now,
a lot of women and children in there.
Yeah, of course.
I think it's about maybe 5%.
There have been more Indians arrive over the past year than Huguenots arrived over the course of 10 years.
And reminder: there is no Huguenot rights movement. They melded naturally through intermarriage and assimilation. The Indians, they're pledging Hindu manifestos now for the Conservative Party. So, but anyway, here's this piece in the Times. So they're preparing to end the use of large military sites like RAF's Scampton to house asylum seekers, and instead will scatter migrants around the country to cut pressure on local services. The government has struck agreements with councils on the number of asylum seekers who will be settled in their area as it moves away from the use of sites such as RAF Wethersfield and Scampton. It is preparing to, quote, massively increase the procurement of, quote, dispersed accommodation, such as empty homes or former student blocks that have self-catering facilities. So they are going to spend taxpayer money on buying up scarce housing stock at the expense of the native population to stick these guys in there.
You could just send them back. You could just send them all back.
Yeah, we could.
You could even better, you could just invest in boats to patrol so they never come in the first place. You send them right back before they get here.
Well, funny that, the one where they died, 2 of them died,
yeah,
the boat caught light. France towed them back. Could just do that.
Yeah.
But they don't. Why? It's choice. They want to flood your country with dependents.
Well, this is Southport coming to your local community.
Quite sadly, yes. Even though the chap that did that wasn't an illegal migrant, yeah, these people do have a disproportionate propensity to commit violent
I still want
crimes.
to know what Axel Rudikabana's parents were doing in the mid-90s.
We can't speculate because that would actually be illegal. Okay,
That wasn't
moving on.
speculation, it was a
I
question.
know, I'm just saying we cannot speculate because
Grunge band, maybe?
yes,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Kurt Cobain. The government said that continuing the use of Bibby Stockholm would cost more than £20 million next year, and scrapping it forms part of the £7.7 billion savings of an asylum seekers over the next 10 years. The problem that you have with the OBR modelling is they think that's going to be a constant number. As we see, it keeps ticking up because if you incentivize them to come here because you're giving them a house, that means it's going to cost more. Fantastic. RAF Scampton in Lincolnshire has been earmarked by the previous government, so that's the Conservative government, RIP, to house up to 800 migrants, scaled down from 2,000, often because if you put too many men in one place, they started stabbing each other. That actually happened. It is understood that conditions set by officials, which must be met before it can be used, have not been reached and it's unlikely to go ahead. The former RAF Wethersfield in North Essex was described as prison-like. Good, because they're criminals. They literally broke into the country. And the residents are now taking legal action against the Home Office. Funded by who? Sorry, how are a bunch of new illegal migrant arrivals taking legal action against the Home Office? With what money are they hiring lawyers? Oh, it's ours. Great. Really glad to be paying for this. As you can tell, I'm really cheered up about this one. Councils have been asked to agree to asylum accommodation plans between local authorities and central government, which would set targets to increase dispersed accommodation. So I'm assuming they're going to tie money to hitting your annual quotas. So that means the quotas are going to go up. So in the areas with the least amount of enrichment, you're going to be getting the most. Quote from one source in the government, it's about having a more equitable dispersal of asylum seekers. Otherwise, you have these areas that have concentrated numbers, and that is what we got in areas with hotels and large sites. That creates a whole host of challenges, meaning services in those areas are stretched, and those asylum seekers can't get basic or crucial support they need. It's because the NHS isn't meeting the needs of the asylum seekers they need to come into your local town. Never mind the needs and interests of the natives. That would just be appalling. We couldn't possibly countenance that. Yeah, fantastic. In Dorset, where Bibby Stockholm was moored, council bosses have said that hotels may need to be used. So little remote places, probably like Cornwall and the like, where you are, is about to see a lot more enrichment.
I'm looking forward to it. It's interesting, though, isn't it, that they're using Air Force bases, military bases, at a time when they've committed to defence cuts, heavy defence cuts as well. I mean, it's really it's an allegory for the state of the nation as a whole, isn't it?
It has echoes of the Roman Empire where they couldn't staff their military, and so instead they decided to populate it with foreign mercenaries who decided to loot the place when the checks stopped getting cashed.
And what's really interesting about the financial predictions of how much this is going to cost is because they assume that maybe these people's children, they'll be productive contributors to the economy. That's not the case. I don't know why you would, take a bunch of North Africans and move them to Britain and expect them to be any more economically productive than they are in North Africa.
Why not? You
And-
racist?
We see how North Africa is.
But
we saw
also-
it in the Netherlands. Second-generation migrants are never as productive as the native-born or European migrants.
Of course not.
But also, I was going to say, look at the picture of the boat. There are no women and children. They're not bringing children with them. So
They're coming for our women and children, as the story that I broke to GB News showed last year, where North African migrant trafficking gangs are advertising women in states of undress and drunkenness on nights out on TikTok, alongside images of successful migrant crossings on Instagram.
Oh, of course. I mean, there have been viral TikToks of, Jamaican migrants in Dublin saying, come here, we need to get everyone pregnant, we need to get the birth rate up, right? There are Asian men who go to, London and film outside of the nightclub saying, look at all these women, they're ready to go, let's go. This is why they're coming.
Yeah.
Like you said, there's no women coming.
Home Office knew about those videos, by the way, and took no action. So they are happy for it to go on. The Home Office has also been buying 16,000 homes for asylum seekers last year. So they offered 5-year guaranteed rent deals to landlords, apparently to cut £8 million a day from the cost of housing migrants in hotels. Why are they here at all?
Well, they're here because natives aren't having enough children. But of course, we know natives aren't having enough children in part because of the huge cost of living.
Yeah,
So-
I can't get a house. That's why I've delayed having
I mean,
kids
people
for
our
months.
age, very common to say, oh, I'm probably never going to be able to own a house. Therefore, I probably shouldn't be having children if I can't afford them. That's not the way the migrants think, though.
No, because they 47% of social housing in London goes to people who were born abroad, even more for second-generation migrants. And so if they're living on a house at my expense, they can afford to have kids.
Right.
And much more than the native population. So that's brilliant. Yeah. These particular houses are being used to house more than 58,000 asylum seekers across England, Wales, and Scotland, double the number in so-called dispersed accommodation a decade ago. So whenever you hear dispersed accommodation, that means private houses bought by the government at your expense for migrants.
I don't think they're buying native English people houses.
No, notably not.
But in the US, in the US, we've seen this something quite similar happening. Dispersing migrants now to places like Maine, which is 94% white, and obviously that has to change.
One of the safest states, at least.
Yep.
We'll see how that goes.
Unrelated, of course, but
Mostly economic factors.
totally economic factors. But
Many youth clubs.
Which is funny because Maine is actually fairly economically depressed. It's not a wealthy state.
Don't notice patterns.
Yet still the.
But what
the white people, they don't stab each
they're
other.
doing, I think, is they're now offering people incentives. Not only to they're not only buying properties and they're not only using hostels. They're offering people incentives to use bedrooms in their houses and outbuildings. And I'm sure we'll see that in this country too. We'll see incentives for ordinary people to use spare space, even maybe pressure on people,
Like the Ukrainian scheme.
Yeah.
The Gary Linekerification of every spare room. You could just deport them all, but instead, Angela Rayner has decided to build a generation of Milton Keynes style towns and partition.
One of the worst towns ever.
Yeah, there is a joke going around on English Instagram a couple of years ago that's like, I'm in a bad place right now, not mentally, it's just Milton Keynes. Angela Rayner has pledged, and this was in May 2024, so before the election, to create 1.5 million homes worth of Milton Keynes style towns. 40% of that is going to be partitioned for social housing. So not just are they buying up the private stock, but another 40% of the 1.5 million will go to social housing, which will then disproportionately go towards the migrants. Absolutely fantastic. All at our expense, again, by the way. And in preparation for this, they've dropped the prohibition from the last government to prevent terrorists from claiming social housing. So if you're a terrorist in the UK, you're now allowed to claim social housing at the expense of the taxpayer. Labour scrapped the proposals just weeks after the election, with Minister Matthew Pennycook confirming the government had no plans to deliver these specific reforms. Currently,
did they say why?
Nope.
So they just did it.
Yeah.
You've got to accept it.
Yep. You have got to house terrorists at your expense.
What about they hate you and want you dead? Do you not understand by now?
Quite.
Maybe if we give them housing, they'll like us.
No, the government wants you dead. That's what other conclusion are you supposed to take from all of this?
Well, the conclusion I'm going to take for it is we're a joke of a country. The cruel joke is being played on us by our elites who are deliberately deciding to import hostile foreign dependent criminals at our expense, and they want to concrete over the entire countryside with the ugliest towns in Britain and replicate them until the heat death of the universe to battery farm migrants for the sake of the GDP.
When we were riding the train here from Bath, and that was just what I was thinking as we were passing by the English countryside. Imagine how many Pakistanis could be housed here. The potential.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. If you want to see what else we're up to, you can follow Connor's series where he gets lots of important people from the political sphere. Here he has one with Dame Andrea Jenkins. And if you want to see what else we're putting out, we post all our links to everything we're producing on our Twitter. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.